In 1947, a tired copywriter at an advertising agency in Philadelphia sat down late at night to finish a job she almost forgot to do. Her name was Frances Geraghty, and she needed a line, a single slogan, for a client that sold diamonds. Before she went to sleep, she scribbled down 4 words. "A diamond is forever." She thought little of it at the time, but those 4 words would go on to be named the advertising slogan of the entire 20th century, and they would do something far stranger than sell a product. They would convince billions of people across almost every culture on Earth that a small piece of crystallized carbon was the natural, ancient, and unbreakable symbol of eternal love. It was one of the most successful ideas ever planted in the human mind, and almost none of it was true. Because here is what that slogan was quietly hiding. Diamonds are not especially rare. The tradition of the diamond engagement ring was not ancient, and the stone you may be wearing on your hand right now is, chemically, the exact same thing as the graphite in a pencil. The whole glittering empire of the diamond was built not on scarcity, but on the appearance of scarcity, carefully manufactured and then sold to the world as eternal truth. So how did a common lump of carbon become the most convincing symbol of priceless, everlasting love in human history? To understand that, you have to go back to the beginning, not to a jewelry store, to the crushing dark, deep inside the earth. A diamond is pure carbon. That is the entire secret, and it is almost insulting in its simplicity. Carbon is one of the most common elements in the universe. It is the soot in your chimney, the charcoal in your grill, the graphite in your pencil, and the main ingredient of every living thing, including you. What makes a diamond is not some rare or magical substance. It is simply the way the carbon atoms are arranged. Squeezed under unimaginable pressure and heat deep in the Earth's mantle, more than 100 kilometers down, over billions of years, carbon atoms can lock together into a rigid, perfect lattice. And that arrangement is what makes a diamond the hardest natural material known and gives it the ability to bend and throw light in that famous way. Take that same carbon and arrange it differently, and you get the soft grey graphite you write with. The most precious gem on Earth and the lead in a schoolchild's pencil are, at heart, the very same thing. The difference is only in the pattern. Those diamonds formed in the deep earth long ago, most of them billions of years ago, in conditions so extreme that they are almost impossible to imagine. And they only reached us because ancient volcanic eruptions, of a special and violent kind, blasted them upward through narrow pipes of rock toward the surface at tremendous speed. Slow them down, and the diamonds would have turned back into ordinary graphite on the way. It was only that violent, rapid journey that let them survive to reach us at all. And so they could be found in only a very few places, in the throats of those ancient dead volcanoes, or in the rivers and gravels where erosion had scattered them over the ages. For most of human history, that meant diamonds came from only a handful of spots on the entire planet. And for the longest stretch of that history, there was really only one. That place was India. For roughly 2,000 years, India was essentially the only source of diamonds in the entire world. They were gathered from riverbeds and alluvial gravels, most famously in the fabled region of Golconda, whose name became a byword for unimaginable wealth, and they made their way along the great trade routes to the courts of Persia, Rome, and beyond. But here is something that might surprise you. For most of that history, no one cared about a diamond's sparkle at all, because no one had figured out how to make it sparkle. The diamonds of the ancient world were mostly uncut, irregular, dull-looking stones, and to a modern eye, most of them would not look particularly impressive at all. What people prized was not their brilliance. It was their extraordinary hardness, their apparent indestructibility, and the aura of mystery and power that came with a stone that nothing on earth could scratch. In ancient India, diamonds were valued as talismans, believed to protect the wearer, to bring courage and strength in battle, to ward off evil spirits, and even to bring good fortune. They were linked with lightning and with the thunderbolt weapon of a god. A flawless diamond was thought to bless its owner, while a flawed one was sometimes feared to bring misfortune. And in the ancient Mediterranean world, the Romans felt much the same. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder described the diamond as the most valuable substance known to human beings, prized above all for being unconquerable, impossible to break or destroy, and believed to hold protective and even magical powers. In fact, that quality is where the very name comes from. Our word diamond descends, through Latin, from the ancient Greek word adamas, which means unconquerable or invincible. The diamond was, first and foremost, the unbreakable stone. For a very long time, that is what a diamond was. A rare, hard, mysterious talisman, worn uncut by the wealthy and powerful, valued for its toughness far more than its beauty. It was genuinely rare, coming from a single corner of the world, and it belonged to a tiny elite. The story of the diamond as we know it, the dazzling stone of romance, had not even begun. That began to change in Europe, and it began with a discovery. Somewhere in the late medieval period, European craftsmen realized something remarkable. Although a diamond is the hardest substance there is, and almost nothing in the world can scratch it, a diamond can be cut and shaped by another diamond, using diamond dust and diamond edges to grind and polish the stone. And if you cut precise flat faces, called facets, into the surface at just the right angles, something magical happens. The diamond stops swallowing light and starts playing with it, catching the light, bending it, splitting it into its colors, and throwing it back out in flashes of fire and brilliance. For the first time, the diamond became not just a hard talisman, but a jewel of pure light. Cutting centers grew up in cities like Bruges, Antwerp, and Amsterdam, drawing skilled craftsmen who guarded their techniques closely, and over the centuries the art of the cut was refined again and again, from simple points and tables to the dazzling, mathematically precise, brilliant cut, engineered specifically to release the maximum possible sparkle. The stone had found its fire, and with it, a whole new destiny. There is a moment often pointed to as the birth of the diamond's link to love and marriage. In 1477, an Austrian archduke named Maximilian gave a diamond ring to Mary of Burgundy as a token of their betrothal. It is frequently described as the first diamond engagement ring, and it helped begin a fashion among Europe's highest nobility for diamonds as symbols of commitment. But notice the key word there, nobility. For centuries after Maximilian, the diamond ring was a plaything of kings and queens and the fabulously rich, not something an ordinary person would ever dream of buying. The idea that every couple, everywhere, should mark their engagement with a diamond was still hundreds of years away, and it would not arrive naturally. It would be manufactured. For now, though, diamonds remained genuinely rare, and their sources remained few. In the early 18th century, around 1725, significant diamond deposits were discovered in Brazil, finally breaking India's ancient near monopoly and providing a new source for the world's jewelers. But even then, diamonds were still special, still scarce, still expensive. They were a luxury for the wealthy, and that scarcity was real. It was about to become a problem, because in the second half of the 19th century, everything changed in a way that should have destroyed the diamond's value forever. In the late 1860s, diamonds were discovered in southern Africa, in the region that would become the town of Kimberley. And this was not a trickle of stones from a riverbed. This was an avalanche. Beneath the South African veld lay enormous vertical pipes of diamond-bearing rock, the frozen throats of those ancient volcanoes packed with stones. As prospectors swarmed in and dug into them, they unearthed diamonds in quantities the world had never remotely seen. Men dug a hole so vast, largely by hand and pick and shovel, that it is still called the Big Hole to this day, one of the largest holes ever excavated by human hands, a gaping wound in the earth ringed by the frantic claims of thousands of diggers. The amount of diamonds pouring out of South Africa dwarfed everything that India and Brazil had produced across their entire histories combined, and it kept coming, year after year, with no end in sight. Almost overnight, the single fundamental fact about diamonds, the fact that made them worth anything at all, that they were rare, simply stopped being true. And this presented the people who owned those mines with a terrifying prospect. If all these diamonds flooded onto the market, their price would collapse. A diamond would become what it perhaps always should have been. A pretty but common stone, cheap enough for anyone, worth very little. The entire value of a diamond depended on the belief that it was rare, and that belief was about to be shattered by the sheer abundance now coming out of the ground. The solution to this problem is the true heart of the diamond story. and it is one of the most audacious business strategies ever devised. If diamonds were no longer naturally rare, then rarity would have to be created artificially. And the man who understood this most clearly was a British businessman named Cecil Rhodes. Rhodes set about buying up the South African diamond mines, one after another, consolidating them under a single company that he founded in 1888. That company was called De Beers, and its purpose was not simply to sell diamonds. Its purpose was to control them. All of them. If you are enjoying this hidden history, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We uncover the secret stories behind the materials that built our world every week, and the diamond's deepest secret is coming up right now. The genius and the audacity of De Beers was to seize control of nearly the entire world's supply of diamonds, and then to deliberately restrict how many were sold. The company and the powerful selling organization it built around itself, sometimes called the Syndicate, would hold diamonds back, stockpiling vast quantities in vaults, releasing them onto the market only slowly and in carefully controlled amounts, no matter how many were actually being dug out of the ground. When new diamond deposits were discovered elsewhere in the world that threatened to flood the market, De Beers would, wherever it could, buy them up and fold them into the same controlled channel, absorbing the threat rather than letting it loose. By controlling the supply this tightly, De Beers could keep prices high and stable across decades, creating the appearance of scarcity for a stone that was, in reality, being mined by the ton and sitting in warehouses. At the height of its power, De Beers is believed to have controlled the overwhelming majority of the world's diamond trade, at times as much as 80 or 90% of it. It was one of the most successful and long-lasting monopolies in the history of business, and it rested on a single, simple, brilliant trick, making an abundant thing behave as though it was scarce. But controlling supply was only half of the operation, because a monopoly can keep prices high only if people actually want to buy the product in the first place. And in the 20th century, diamond demand faced a crisis. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, diamond prices sagged, and the whole idea of spending a fortune on a shiny stone seemed foolish in hard times. De Beers needed people not just to buy diamonds, but to believe, deep in their hearts, that they had to. And so, in 1938, the company turned to an American advertising agency and launched what would become one of the most effective marketing campaigns ever created. The goal was breathtaking in its ambition. De Beers and its advertisers set out to make the diamond engagement ring feel not like a purchase, but like an ancient, essential, unquestionable tradition, the one true and proper way to express love and commitment. They understood that they were not really selling a stone, they were selling an emotion and a rule. They seeded diamonds into Hollywood films and onto the fingers of glamorous movie stars, so that audiences would associate them with romance and success. They fed stories and photographs to newspapers and magazines, showing which celebrities had received which enormous diamonds. They sent lecturers into schools to speak to young women about diamonds and romance. And they planted an idea, entirely invented out of thin air, that a man ought to spend a specific, large portion of his income on the ring, a guideline they quietly nudged upward over the years, from the equivalent of 1 month's salary to 2, so that the more a man earned, the more he was expected to spend. And in 1947, they crowned the whole effort with those 4 immortal words: "A diamond is forever." That slogan was a masterpiece, and it was doing more than one job. On the surface, it tied the diamond to eternal, unbreakable love, the perfect symbol for a marriage meant to last. But underneath, it was solving a very practical business problem. If a diamond is forever, then you never sell it. You keep it, and you pass it down. And that mattered enormously to De Beers, because if millions of people ever started reselling their old diamonds, a flood of second-hand stones would hit the market, and everyone would quickly discover an uncomfortable truth. A diamond, once bought, is worth far less than you paid for it. The used diamond market would have exposed the illusion, so the campaign made sure the diamond was something you kept forever, out of love, and never, ever resold. The scarcity was protected on both ends, and the campaign worked beyond anyone's wildest hopes. In the space of a few decades, the diamond engagement ring went from an uncommon custom to a near-universal expectation across the Western world, embraced by the vast majority of couples as simply the way things are done. But the most revealing proof of just how manufactured this tradition was came from the other side of the world. In the mid-20th century, Japan had essentially no tradition of diamond engagement rings at all, so De Beers launched a marketing campaign there too. And within roughly a generation, a country that had never given diamonds for engagement saw the diamond ring become the standard, expected symbol of marriage for a huge share of couples. A tradition thousands of years old, people assumed. In truth, it had been created, almost from nothing, by advertising within living memory. That is the clearest evidence of all, that the meaning of the diamond was not discovered, it was sold. But beneath the glittering romance, the diamond carried a darker cost, one that would eventually force the world to confront it. In the late 20th century, as brutal civil wars tore through parts of Africa, it emerged that diamonds were helping to fund the violence. In countries like Sierra Leone, Angola, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, rebel groups and warlords seized control of diamond fields and used the stones to buy weapons, financing campaigns of appalling cruelty against civilians. These came to be known as conflict diamonds, or more bluntly, blood diamonds. They were mined, often by forced labor under horrifying conditions, sometimes by people who had been mutilated or terrorized into working, and then sold into the very same global market that supplied the world's engagement rings. So a stone bought to symbolize love and given as a token of a lifelong promise could, entirely unknown to the person wearing it, have paid for guns and for atrocities committed thousands of miles away. The gap between the meaning the diamond had been sold with and the reality of how some of them reached the shop window could not have been more grotesque. The scandal grew large enough that, in the early 2000s, the international community created a certification system known as the Kimberley process, intended to keep conflict diamonds out of the legitimate trade. It was an imperfect fix, and critics argue it left real gaps, but it forced the world to see, at last, that there could be blood in the supply chain behind the romance. And in the end, the great illusion began, slowly, to crack. The De Beers monopoly, which had ruled the diamond world for a century, gradually lost its grip. New sources of diamonds opened up in places like Russia, Canada, and Australia, outside De Beers' control, and legal pressure over the company's monopoly practices mounted until its share of the world market fell from near total dominance to a fraction of what it once was. The single hand that had controlled the world's diamonds loosened. And then came the final fitting twist. Scientists learned how to make diamonds. Not cheap imitations like glass or cubic zirconia, but real diamonds, chemically and physically identical to the ones dug from the earth, grown in a matter of weeks inside a machine at a fraction of the cost. To a jeweler's instruments, a lab-grown diamond and a mined diamond are the same stone because they genuinely are the same stone, the same carbon in the same lattice, indistinguishable to everything but the most specialized equipment. And their arrival has begun to do the one thing De Beers spent a century preventing. It has reminded people that a diamond is just crystallized carbon, that it can be produced in abundance whenever we choose, and that its towering price was always a story rather than a fact of nature. The scarcity that was a lie is finally being spoken out loud. For over a century, this simple stone-shaped human desire in ways almost no one understood. It was a hard, mysterious talisman in ancient India, prized for being unbreakable. It became a jewel of light in the workshops of Europe. It was found in such abundance in South Africa that it should have become worthless, and instead a monopoly locked it away to keep it scarce, and an advertising campaign convinced the whole world that a lump of carbon was the eternal proof of love. It funded wars, and it was finally unmasked by a machine that can grow it in a laboratory. That arc tells you something that is not really about diamonds at all. Value, we like to believe, comes from rarity and from meaning, from things being genuinely scarce and genuinely significant. But the diamond proves how completely both of those things can be manufactured. The diamond was not rare, so scarcity was created for it by hoarding. The diamond had no deep connection to love, so meaning was created for it by advertising. And both illusions were maintained so skillfully for so long that they came to feel like ancient, natural truths woven into the fabric of romance itself. The most precious symbol in human relationships turned out to be, at its core, a lump of your pencil lead, wrapped in one of the greatest stories ever sold. So the next time you see a diamond flashing on someone's hand, or stand before a jeweler's window watching the stones throw back the light, take a moment to consider what you are looking at. This is crystallized carbon, the twin of the graphite in a pencil, formed in the deep earth and then found in such quantities that it should have been cheap. A stone made rare by a locked vault and made priceless by 4 words a tired copywriter scribbled before bed. A stone sold to the entire world as forever, when the only thing that was truly forever was the story. A diamond was never just a stone. It never was. If this story surprised you, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling us which part of the diamond's history caught you off guard the most. We have many more hidden histories of the materials that built our world still to come, so make sure you do not miss them.